The story you're about to hear is all about perseverance, discipline, and passion. It's the journey of an ordinary guy who became one of the biggest names in British bodybuilding. A path that still inspires today and proves it's never too late to start. So grab your pre-workout and join us as we dive into this journey filled with challenges, victories, and life lessons. When we talk about bodybuilding legends, we usually think of people who seem destined for the stage from day one. But Tony Emmett's story shows that's not always the case. Born in 1938 in the charming town of Ilkley, Yorkshire, England, Tony lived a simple life as a postman. His daily routine was far from glamorous, long walks delivering mail through the streets of town. But there was something different about him, this quiet determination and a growing passion for physical training. While most people just saw a hard-working mailman, Tony was already shaping the physique that would one day bring him glory. Standing 5 feet 10 inches, 1.77 meters, and weighing between 183 and 194 pounds, 83 to 88 kilograms, on stage, Tony had some impressive proportions. His arms measured 20 inches, 50 centimeters, his chest 50 inches, 127 centimeters, and his thighs a solid 26 inches, 67 centimeters. Numbers on paper might sound cold, but anyone who saw Tony under the stage lights knew they represented way more: symmetry, dedication, and years of relentless training. But before he could earn champion status, Tony had to take his first steps into the competitive bodybuilding world. From a young age, he spent hours in local gyms, fascinated by the idea of transforming his body into something beyond ordinary. That passion became the engine that would drive him through time, routine, and even the limits of being just a mailman from England. In 1960, Tony decided to put his hard work to the test in front of judges and a live audience. And he didn't choose just any stage. He debuted at the NABBA Mr. Universe, one of the sport's biggest competitions. To the surprise of many, and maybe even himself, he landed a very respectable 4th place in his very first outing. For a newcomer, that was already a clear sign he had something special. The next year, 1961, he returned to the stage at the NABBA Mr. Britain, climbing another step and taking 3rd place. The results showed real talent, but interestingly, Tony still didn't see bodybuilding as a career. He went back to his postman life, kept training, but wasn't in a rush to turn it all into a profession. After a few years away from competition, Tony made a decision that would change his life for good. In 1969, now 31 years old, he stepped on stage again at the NABBA Mr. Britain. For many, that age would have seemed too late to start a high-level career. But Tony proved maturity wasn't a weakness, it was his strength. He took 3rd place, showing he was ready to take bodybuilding more seriously. 2 years later, in 1971, he hit the NABBA Universe Pro stage, facing some of the sport's giants, including none other than Frank Zane, one of the all-time icons of aesthetics and symmetry. And Tony held his ground, taking 3rd place again and cementing his spot among the best. For a guy who'd once split his days between lifting weights and delivering letters, that was a huge leap. The 1970s became a decade of steady growth for Tony. He competed across different federations: NABBA, WBBG, IFBB, and WABA, always chasing new challenges. That wasn't common back then, but it showed he wasn't afraid to test himself against the best, no matter the stage or organization. Every contest was another chance to prove he had what it took to stay at the top. What's interesting is that Tony wasn't the biggest guy in terms of mass, but he stood out with his muscle quality, definition, and stage presence. He never got intimidated by athletes carrying more bulk. Instead, he used his balanced aesthetics as his weapon, and that won over both crowds and judges, securing him strong finishes at high-level shows. Over those years, Tony wasn't just stacking up good placings. He was building a solid reputation. Fellow athletes respected him, fans admired his discipline, and bodybuilding magazines started featuring him on covers. That was recognition that the Yorkshire Postman had become a heavyweight name in the sport. By the mid-1970s, his dedication started paying off even bigger. In 1976, Tony Emmott scored 2 huge wins: the WBBG Pro Mr. World and the NABBA Universe Pro Short Class. These titles officially put his name on the international bodybuilding map, proving he wasn't just there to compete. He was there to win. These victories paved the way for the biggest moment of his career, 1977. That was the year Tony reached his ultimate triumph, winning the NABA Mr. Universe professional title. Without a doubt, that trophy is what sealed his name among the sport's true champions. Becoming a world champion in such a competitive bodybuilding era was something only a few ever pulled off. And that wasn't all. Still in 1977, Tony took second place at the Wobble World Championships, proving his physique and stage presence were among the very best in the world. This wasn't just a lucky streak. It was the peak of an athlete who had been building his journey step by step until he hit the very top. From 1978 to 1980, Tony decided to take on one of the biggest challenges of his entire career, the IFBB Mr. Olympia, the most prestigious bodybuilding competition in the world. There, he shared the stage with legends like Frank Zane, Robbie Robinson, and Mohamed Makawai, names that shaped the history of the sport. His best placing came in 1978, when he finished 5th in the lightweight division. That result proved he could stand toe-to-toe with the best bodybuilders on the planet. Even though he never took home the Olympia crown, just stepping onto that stage was a landmark achievement. After all, not every NABA or WBBG champion managed to stand out when they switched federations. Tony, with his polished aesthetics and consistency, showed he could hold his own against the icons of his time. That detail highlights just how far-reaching his career really was. In total, Tony competed officially in 25 contests, with multiple top 3 finishes and at least 3 major titles to his name. Each trophy represented not just a personal win, but the realization of a dream that started in a small English town and spread across the world. But his achievements weren't just about numbers or placings. They represented courage, the guts to push past limits, to face giants, and to prove himself over and over again. While he was shining on stage, Tony also showed he had a vision that went way beyond competitions. Determined to leave a lasting mark in his hometown of Ilkley, he founded the Alakana Health Studio. More than just a gym, the place quickly became a hub for people passionate about fitness, training, and well-being, reflecting the very lifestyle Tony believed in. From day one, the studio had a clear difference. Tony didn't just want to offer weights and machines. He wanted to deliver a full experience of taking care of the body. That's why he came up with the innovative idea of including a healthy food restaurant inside the gym itself. At that time, this was revolutionary. In an era when nutrition wasn't as widely emphasized, Tony already understood that results came from combining training with proper food. That detail made Alakana Health Studio way more than a place to lift weights. It became a lifestyle center where people learned about discipline, balance, and habits that went far beyond looks. In a way, Tony was taking the same philosophy that made him successful on stage and sharing it off stage. Over time, the studio evolved into the Alakana Health Spa, located on Grove Promenade in Ilkley. Even after the name and structure changed, the place became a landmark in the town. Tony's presence and influence were so strong that, despite all the changes, his legacy continued to live on, inspiring new generations. That entrepreneurial side revealed a different angle of Tony. He didn't want to be just an athlete who stepped on stage. He wanted to transform the environment around him and leave a tangible legacy for his community. That alone set him apart from many of his peers, who focused only on competitions without thinking much about life beyond them. The gym also served as a living showcase of his career. People who had seen him on magazine covers or stage lights could actually train at his place, live out his vision of health, and maybe even follow in his footsteps of dedication. It was as if every member became part of his mission to spread bodybuilding in a positive and transformative way. Tony's journey wasn't limited to competitions. His impressive physique and his approach to the sport earned him recognition far beyond the stage. He appeared on the covers of major magazines like Health and Strength, Muscle Training Illustrated, Athletic Sport Journal, and Muscle World, publications that were basically Bibles for bodybuilders at the time. Seeing Tony on those covers was like a stamp of approval that he had truly become an icon, both in his home country and abroad. So what really made Tony stand out? It wasn't just the titles he won. It was his flawless symmetry, his muscle quality, and most of all, that striking midsection that drew eyes in every competition. In an era when aesthetics and balance were still highly valued, he embodied the ideal of a proportionate, detailed physique. very different from the path of extreme mass that bodybuilding would take in the years to come. That quality turned him into a sort of aesthetic benchmark. While many athletes were chasing sheer size at any cost, Tony showed that harmony could be just as, if not more, impactful than piling on muscle. His image carried a clear message. Bodybuilding could also be art, not just numbers on a scale. It didn't take long before he was considered one of Britain's greatest bodybuilders before the rise of Dorian Yates. And that's no small comparison. Dorian would go on to revolutionize the sport in the 90s with his monstrous mass, but before him, Tony had already paved part of that road, proving England had the talent to stand against bodybuilding's global powerhouses. Another thing that strengthened his image was the way he treated fans and the media. Stories from admirers and fellow athletes described Tony as a true gentleman, humble, approachable, and always willing to share his experience. That attitude only boosted his prestige, building a genuine bond with people who followed him, whether in magazines or live shows. At the same time, his presence helped popularize bodybuilding in a period when the sport was still carving out space. For many young people flipping through magazines or seeing his posters, Tony was living proof that you could transform your body, and along with it, your life. He wasn't some unreachable figure. He was a real, relatable example of dedication and discipline. That's why Tony's recognition went way beyond trophies. He became a familiar face, an aesthetic inspiration, and a role model both on and off the stage. Throughout his career, he built not just muscle but also relationships that cemented his status as a true icon of British bodybuilding. In 1979, already established as one of his country's top athletes, he sat down for an interview with Chris Lund, the legendary photographer and writer who documented the golden years of the sport. That conversation revealed not only Tony's training methods, but also his mature outlook on the athlete's lifestyle, giving fans a deeper, more personal glimpse into his journey. That same year, Tony crossed continents and traveled to Australia, where he trained at the famous Finley's Gymnasium alongside the legendary Peter McCarthy. For the Australians, it was a privilege to host such a high-caliber European athlete, and for Tony, it was a chance to share experiences and leave his mark on a different scene. These international encounters helped solidify his image as a global athlete, not just a British one. But what impressed people the most wasn't just his physique or his titles, it was the man behind them. Fans and colleagues all tell the same story. Tony Emmott was a true gentleman. Humility, kindness, and sportsmanship stood out just as much as his muscles. That mix made him not just respected, but genuinely admired by anyone lucky enough to meet him. And in such a competitive, ego-driven environment, that attitude meant even more. While some athletes were obsessed with outshining everyone else, Tony won people over through how he treated others. Fans recall not just his stage presence, but also his warm and enthusiastic way of posing for photos or helping fellow lifters. He truly inspired through example. Of course, his run in the IFBB wasn't as bright as it could have been. Many critics argued that British athletes, and non-Americans in general, were at a disadvantage compared to the favoritism given to US competitors. That perception only adds to the idea that, despite his talent and hard work, the results on paper didn't always reflect the full weight of his career. Still, none of that ever diminished Tony's impact. In fact, it strengthened his story, showing that an athlete's legacy isn't built only on official wins, but on how he inspires, motivates, and influences those around him. After more than 2 decades in competitive bodybuilding, Tony finally reached the point of closing that chapter. In 1983, he stepped on stage for the last time at the Grand Prix Portland in the US. Already 45 years old, he went up against much younger athletes, including the talented Tony Pearson, who was just 26 at the time. In that farewell, Tony placed 9th, a respectable finish given the field and his age. To some fans, it might have looked like a quiet goodbye, without the glory of one last big win. But in reality, that final appearance meant much more. The courage to stay competitive even when the odds were stacked against him. Tony knew his time on stage was winding down, but he chose to bow out with dignity, refusing to back down from the challenge. And that alone is a powerful lesson. Looking back, Tony's journey is nothing short of impressive. More than 25 official competitions, big wins, top finishes among the world's best, and one title that defined his life. Mr. Universe 1977. Each milestone carried symbolic weight, proving that the young postman from Yorkshire had truly become a bodybuilding icon. After retirement, Tony never walked away from the sport. Quite the opposite. He devoted even more of his time to his gym, the Alakana Health Studio, which was already a regional landmark. There, he found a new way to contribute to bodybuilding, helping others reach their own goals, whether for health, looks, or competition. His role as a mentor and businessman revealed something deeper about Tony. He didn't want his story to be just about himself, but about the people he could inspire. Countless athletes and lifters of that era benefited from his advice, his experience, and his practical outlook on balancing training, nutrition, and discipline. Back in Ilkley, his presence became a source of pride for the community. Tony wasn't just Mr. Universe. He was a hometown hero who carried the name of the city to the world stage. Yet he stayed down to earth, approachable, and committed to the daily grind at his gym. That closeness with people was a key part of his legacy. So, Tony Emmett's retirement wasn't an end, it was a transition. He left the spotlight, but stayed active in the bodybuilding scene as a guide, a role model, and an inspiration. Tony's life is a true example of how passion and patience can completely change your destiny. He started as a simple postman, with no big expectations, but he never let go of his love for training. Through dedication, discipline, and courage, he rose all the way to Mr. Universe, proving it doesn't matter where you start. It matters how far you're willing to go. His story shows us that it's always possible to rewrite your life. Tony proved that even in unexpected paths, success is within reach. He didn't just build an admirable physique. He built an inspiring story, showing that dreams can become reality when backed by hard work and perseverance. More than titles, Tony Emmott left behind a legacy, that of a true pioneer of British bodybuilding. Even before names like Dorian Yates, Tony was already carrying England onto international stages, opening doors and inspiring athletes to believe in themselves. His mark still lives on in everyone striving to push past their limits inside and outside the gym. And that's the takeaway we can bring into our own lives. Believe in yourself, even when the odds don't seem in your favor. Tony's story proves there's no right age, no perfect moment, and no easy path. What exists is the choice to start and the courage to keep going. So, what dream have you been putting off because you think it's too late? If Tony Emmett's journey inspired you, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps our work and motivates us to bring you more stories like this. And consider becoming a channel member to unlock exclusive content and support this project even further. Of course, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling us what impressed you most about Tony's story. Your thoughts are super important and help grow this community of bodybuilding fans and lovers of true stories of perseverance. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. On the end screen, another special video will pop up that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Click on it and keep traveling with us through the history of bodybuilding's greatest names. See you there.